My children plotted to steal my fortune. But the real betrayal came from a dead husband's ghostly voice, demanding a secret key before Black Ops agents stormed the house. The silk sheets felt cold against my skin, but the chill in my gut had nothing to do with the expensive Egyptian cotton. I watched them from the balcony, my two perfect children, Marcus and Chloe, huddled by the infinity pool, their hushed tones betraying a tension thicker than the humid summer air. They thought I couldn't hear them, sipping my artisan coffee 20 feet above, but every syllable was a shard of glass piercing my composure. For years, I'd played the doting, slightly naive widow, the benevolent matriarch whose wealth was just there for them to inherit someday. Someday. That word was clearly not in their vocabulary anymore. Marcus, always the schemer, leaned in close to Chloe. His voice, usually slick and charming when addressing clients, was now a low, conspiratorial rasp. It has to be done before the Q3 review. If she signs those new venture papers, the liquid assets will be tied up for years. Chloe, my delicate artist, the one I'd shielded from every harsh reality, was surprisingly ruthless. But the access codes? Dad set up the fail-safes after that scare with the offshore accounts 10 years ago. Only she knows the sequence. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't about a misunderstanding or a petty sibling squabble over the summer house. This was a calculated, predatory strike at the very foundation of the empire I'd spent the last decade rebuilding after Richard died. I knew the truth. They weren't just impatient. They were desperate. Marcus had gambled heavily on a cryptocurrency collapse that never happened, and Chloe's gallery was drowning in debt. My money was their lifeboat, and they were plotting to hijack the ship. The sheer audacity of it made me physically sick. I'd provided everything, the trust funds, the access to exclusive circles, the unquestioning belief in their potential. And this was my reward, a silent, venomous coup. I retreated inside, needing a moment to process the betrayal without them seeing the tremor in my hands. I walked past the portrait of Richard, our eyes seeming to meet, and then I stopped dead in the hallway, leading to my private study. The door was ajar. That was the first anomaly. I always locked it. Always. I pushed it open slowly. The room was exactly as I'd left it. Mahogany desk, leather chair, the faint scent of aged paper. But something was wrong. The heavy, antique safe, hidden behind the Renoir print, was sitting open. Not forced open, but open. My breath caught. I remembered the sequence perfectly. Right twice, left once, right 3 times, hold for 10 seconds, then left 4 times. Only I knew that code, a sequence Richard and I set up right after our wedding, a failsafe against any outside threat. My mind raced. Had they tried? Did they brute force it? No, the mechanism wasn't damaged. They couldn't have gotten in. I approached the open safe. Inside, the usual stacks of bearer bonds and reserve cash were untouched. But one small velvet-lined compartment, the one where I kept the most sensitive documents relating to the initial company merger, the one that kept the whole structure legally sound and hidden from any scrutiny, was empty. I grabbed my phone, adrenaline flooding my system. I had to call my security consultant, Mark. He would know what to do about this intrusion. I scrolled to his contact, my thumb hovering over the call button. That's when I saw it. Tucked neatly under the edge of the empty compartment where the documents used to be was a folded piece of heavy, cream-coloured stationery. It wasn't from my personal stationery collection. My hands were shaking so violently, I nearly dropped the phone as I unfolded the note. The handwriting was elegant, unfamiliar, yet chillingly familiar. It wasn't Marcus's hurried scrawl or Chloe's sweeping script. It was an older hand, one I hadn't seen in nearly 20 years. The note contained only 3 perfectly aligned lines. Your children plot well. A shame they don't understand the real game. My blood turned to ice. How could they know about the plot? And then I read the second line. The assets they seek were already moved. They belong to the organisation now. The organisation? What organisation? My world tilted. I reread the final line, my vision blurring with sudden, paralysing terror. And you, Eleanor, should have paid your debt to Uncle Victor years ago. We'll discuss your failure to settle your outstanding balance for the protection racket he ran in the early days. The protection that allowed Richard to secure the very first seed money for this entire empire. I dropped the note. Richard hadn't died in a simple skiing accident. He had been bought out of something dark, something criminal. And now, the ghosts of his past, ghosts I thought I'd buried with him, had surfaced. My children weren't just trying to steal from me. They had stumbled into a trap set for my late husband, a trap that was about to spring shut on me. A soft chime echoed from the kitchen. A delivery notification. I walked mechanically towards the open glass doors leading to the terrace. On the marble countertop sat a small, unmarked wooden crate. It wasn't addressed. Attached to the lid was a small, high-tech proximity sensor, the kind used by specialized security details. Hesitantly, I lifted the sensor off. It immediately began to flash a rapid, angry red light, accompanied by a piercing, repeating alarm sound. I realized too late that removing the sensor was the activation trigger. I threw myself backward as the lid of the crate sprang open with a heavy metallic thunk. Inside, nestled on black velvet, was not a bomb, but something far worse, something designed not to kill quickly, but to dismantle a life slowly, methodically. It was a heavy, leather-bound ledger filled with meticulous records. And sitting right on top of the ledger, glinting under the harsh midday sun, was a single, official-looking seal stamped in deep crimson wax, the official insignia of the Service of Internal Security's Financial Crimes Division. Below the seal, a single typed sentence was printed across the top of the ledger cover. Case file, Eleanor Vance. Investigation opened regarding capital flight and conspiracy to defraud creditors. My children's plot was amateur hour. Someone else had been watching, waiting, and now they weren't just coming for the money, they were coming for me, armed with evidence linking me to Richard's old secrets, and they had just used the supposed security package as a formal notice of investigation. I stared at the insignia, my breath catching in my throat. Just then, my personal security chief, Gary, burst into the room, his face pale, his earpiece clearly malfunctioning. "Ma'am, the perimeter alarm just triggered. 3 armoured vehicles just breached the south gate. They aren't using standard tactical gear. They look like agents." I spun around, trapped between the armed breach outside and the evidence of my husband's hidden sins sitting on the counter. Before I could even formulate a command, the main sliding glass door exploded inward, not shattered by force, but cleanly cut, retracting silently into the wall frame. Standing in the aperture, silhouetted against the blinding afternoon light, were 3 figures in unmarked, dark tactical armour. They weren't shouting commands or demanding surrender. They were simply standing there, radiating lethal patience. The lead figure raised a hand, not to signal a weapon, but simply to hold up a familiar, heavy wedding band. My wedding band, the one I had worn every day since Richard's funeral, the one I had taken off precisely 5 minutes ago when I went to wash my hands after the coffee. The masked figure tilted its head, and a synthesized voice boomed into the quiet, opulent room, a voice chillingly familiar, the cadence of a man I thought I'd buried alongside my husband. "Hello, Eleanor. Did you truly think Richard died cleanly? He left me something too, you know, and now I need it back, starting with those assets your little thieves were poking at." The figure pointed not at me, but past me, directly at the gaping, empty safe. "Where is the key to the private vault, Eleanor?" "The one hidden beneath the floorboard of the first house," the synthesized voice echoed, sharp and utterly devoid of emotion, slicing through the sudden paralyzed silence. My blood didn't just turn to ice, it felt like it vaporized in my veins. The voice, it was impossible. It was the exact timbre of Richard's voice when he was furious, overlaid with that digital distortion he'd experimented with for his encrypted business lines years ago. "Richard?" The word tasted like ash on my tongue. The armoured figure took a slow, deliberate step into the room, the leather ledger still clutched in its gloved hand. The weapon it held was not the kind used by common criminals. It was a high-velocity subsonic rifle, silent, precise, and clearly military-grade. "Richard is gone, Eleanor, but his debts are eternal. The key, now." My mind was screaming, a discordant symphony of panic and denial. This wasn't a random, organized scheme. This was personal, targeted, and deeply connected to the life I thought I had escaped. The protection racket note now made a terrifying kind of sense. Richard hadn't just owed Victor money, he'd been involved in something so deep that even his death hadn't bought him freedom. "I don't know what you're talking about," I whispered, my eyes darting towards the terrace doors, where the remaining two figures stood guard, blocking any escape route into the manicured gardens. "Richard handled everything before the accident." The lead figure laughed, a harsh, mechanical sound that confirmed the voice was a recording, a cruel manipulation designed to break me. "Accident? Please, we both know the telemetry on that skiing incident was fabricated before the snow melted. He sold us out to save his precious empire, and he hid the real leverage, the original transaction ledger, the one detailing the transfer of assets to Victor's operation through that shell corporation in the Caymans." The pressure was immense. My children's petty theft suddenly looked like a childish game of hide-and-seek compared to this life-and-death confrontation rooted in decades-old betrayal. "The ledger you're holding," I managed, pointing shakily at the open book. "It's fake. It's a setup." "Perhaps," the figure conceded, smoothly flicking open the book to a page detailing offshore wire transfers under the name VK. "But the Service of Internal Security doesn't investigate based on hearsay, Eleanor. They investigate based on paper trails. And we provided them with a very compelling one this morning, a trail that starts right where your children were trying to dig, your liquid accounts." The realization struck me with sickening clarity. Marcus and Chloe hadn't just failed to steal the money. Their clumsy attempts to gain access had tipped off the real players that I was vulnerable, that the security around the central assets was about to be tested. The investigation wasn't a consequence of the plot. It was the weapon used by the organization to legitimize their takeover. "You used my children to flush me out," I choked out. "No," the figure corrected, stepping closer, the rifle muzzle never wavering from my chest. "They were just collateral damage. You see, Eleanor, when Richard fled, he didn't just take the money. He took the access codes to the facility where Victor's primary cash was stored, the original investment capital. That's what we need, and the floorboard key is the only way to override the biometric locks on that site." I remembered the first house, the small fixer-upper Richard and I bought when we were penniless. There was a loose floorboard in the pantry, a silly superstition, a place where he kept his childhood lucky coin. I'd forgotten about it until just now. "I will not give you that key," I stated, finding a sliver of resolve. "You want payment? You deal with the estate, the lawyers, the courts." "Courts?" The figure's posture shifted, showing contempt. "We are the court, Eleanor, and we don't waste time on procedure when decades of leverage are at stake." Suddenly, a high-pitched, panicked shout echoed from the adjoining wing of the house, the nursery wing where I kept my precious, fragile Chloe, and my reckless Marcus sequestered, supposedly safe. "Help! Let us go!" It was Marcus, followed by a muffled, desperate scream that sounded distinctly like Chloe. My composure shattered entirely. "What have you done to them?" I roared, lunging forward, forgetting the weapon, forgetting the heavily armoured men. The leader didn't move to stop me physically. Instead, he keyed something on his wrist communicator. The synthesized voice of Richard returned, colder than before. "They are secure. They are now an incentive. You give us the key, and they walk out of here alive. You hesitate, and we send you the evidence of their own involvement in corporate espionage. Evidence we conveniently leaked to the internal security agents who are currently encircling your property, and watch them take the fall for your crimes." The choice was impossible. Surrender the leverage Richard had bought with his soul, or condemn my children to prison for the mess they'd created trying to steal from me. The figure tilted its head again, waiting for the final answer. But before I could speak, the tactical leader's comms crackled violently. The synthesized voice was replaced by sharp, frantic static. Then a sudden, clear transmission, not from his team, but from an outside source booming through the room's high-end speaker system. "Attention, unit designated Vulture 1, abort immediate seizure. We have a Code Omega breach at your current location. Hostile counter-intervention detected. Repeat. New players on the board. They are heavily armed and moving fast. They are not with the service. Before Vulture One could react, before I could even process the reality that there was another paramilitary group involved, the entire western wall of the house, the wall facing the dense, heavily wooded acreage, disintegrated in a blinding flash of heat and concussive force. It wasn't an explosion. It was an instant, surgical vaporization. Through the gaping, smoking hole, silhouetted against the dark tree line, stood figures clad entirely in sleek, matte black body armor, utterly distinct from the tactical gear of Vulture One. These newcomers carried no rifles. Instead, each one held a weapon that looked impossibly alien. Long, silent barrels humming with an eerie blue light. The leader of the new group, a woman whose helmet was entirely unmarred by any insignia, raised her hand, and the humming intensified. Vulture One, her voice sliced through the confusion, utterly calm, utterly commanding. Stand down. Eleanor Vance is under our protection. She made a deal with the right party this morning. Vulture One hesitated, his rifle dropping slightly as he processed the emergence of a superior unknown force. Then, the woman in black pointed a humming weapon directly at the leather ledger resting on the counter, the ledger that implicated me in Richard's old crimes. With a soft, pressurized hiss, a beam of concentrated energy shot out, vaporizing the book instantly into fine grey dust. The past is closed, Eleanor, the woman in black stated, her eyes visible through the narrow visor, locking onto mine with terrifying intensity. But we didn't come for your debts. We came for the thing Richard hid in that vault, and we're taking it now. Which means you either help us open it, or we'll use your children as live bait to make you. The air crackled, thick with ozone from the alien weaponry and the acrid scent of vaporized paper. Vulture One, the man mimicking my dead husband, was caught between the overwhelming threat of the new arrivals and the immediate danger to the children they'd been using as leverage. Who the hell are you people? Vulture One barked, his synthetic voice cracking with genuine alarm as the blue light weapons remained steady, unwavering. This asset transfer was sanctioned by a primary oversight committee. The woman in the matte black armor, the supposed protector, took the final, decisive step into the room, flanked by two silent, imposing figures. She didn't bother engaging Vulture One further. Her focus was solely on me, Eleanor Vance, the wealthy widow now realizing she was caught in a deadly crossfire between two shadowy organizations fighting over the ghost of her husband's past. We are the cleaning crew, Eleanor, she said, her voice dropping its synthesized edge, becoming human, sharp, and startlingly familiar. And the deal you made this morning, the one you thought only involved Marcus and Chloe's bail bond, was actually a contingency payment for Richard. He owed us too, but for saving him from Victor's initial threat, not the protection racket you remember. My memory flashed back. The cryptic late-night phone calls Richard used to take in the garage, the paranoia, the sudden, unexplained trips abroad 5 years ago. He hadn't just been building an empire, he'd been running from enemies far worse than any mob boss. You worked with him? I whispered, horror mixing with a desperate surge of hope. If she worked with him, maybe she could save the children. I loved him, she corrected, the word laced with the devastating sorrow that momentarily cracked her armoured facade. And I watched him sacrifice everything, including his reputation, to hide the real prize from Victor. That prize is in the private vault, the one that needs the key from under the floorboard. Vulture One saw his chance while the woman, the ghost of Richard's past life, was momentarily distracted by emotion. He raised his subsonic rifle, aiming not at the woman, but directly at my exposed flank. But I was no longer the naive matriarch plotting coffee on the balcony. I was a woman fighting for survival, armed with the knowledge that both sides were willing to destroy my children to get what they wanted. As Vulture One's finger tightened on the trigger, I didn't dive for cover. I moved toward the counter, not towards the ledger dust, but towards the heavy, decorative paperweight, a solid bronze bust of Richard. With a surge of desperate adrenaline, I pivoted and hurled the bronze weight with all my might. It struck Vulture One's helmet dead center with a sickening crunch. The synthesized voice sputtered into silence, the man collapsing in a heap. the high-tech weapon clattering uselessly on the imported marble floor. The woman in black blinked, stunned by the sudden, primitive retaliation. It was the opening she needed. "Secure Vulture One's personnel, priority 0, extract the children," she commanded her team. The silent figures surged forward, moving with terrifying efficiency. They bypassed me, moving like shadows toward the adjoining wing, neutralizing the 2 remaining armored figures with swift, non-lethal pressure points, not wasting a single shot. I stood there, breathing heavily, the bronze weight lying yards away, the silence broken only by the crunch of boots securing Vulture One's team. The woman approached me, pulling off her helmet. The face underneath was familiar, though hardened by years of conflict I knew nothing about. It was Sarah, Richard's brilliant, fiercely loyal junior executive from 20 years ago, the one who vanished right before the company truly took off. "Eleanor, I need the key. We don't have time. The service agents are still outside, and they will breach the main gates any minute now to investigate the gunfire." I looked past her, through the gaping hole in the wall where the woods began. I saw Marcus and Chloe being gently escorted out by her team, bewildered but physically unharmed. They were safe for now because of this war I never knew I was fighting. The choice was stark. Give Sarah the key and let her take the last piece of Richard's secret history, the leverage that could have protected my children from this madness, or risk letting the government cleanup crew sweep us all into a federal holding cell where the truth would be twisted into a narrative of my own guilt. I looked at Sarah, at the love and betrayal warring in her eyes. Richard had trusted her with the contingency plan, not me. "I don't have the key," I said, my voice firming, finally regaining control of the narrative. Richard always kept the real final contingency separate. Not in the house, not on paper. Sarah frowned, a genuine expression of shock crossing her face. "What do you mean? He told you what he needed you to believe to execute the plan," I cut in, a cold, ruthless clarity descending upon me. "He told me everything when he thought he was dying in the hospital, before he even made it to the ski lift. The key isn't a physical object, it's a sequence." I walked over to the wreckage of the safe, ignoring the scorch marks. I placed my hand on the cold metal interior. "The key is the date of our wedding anniversary, reversed. And the fail-safe phrase is the first line of the poem he wrote me before we were married." I spoke the sequence clearly, rapidly. The true override. The moment the final digit was spoken, a small, nearly invisible panel beneath the safe compartment slid open with a barely audible click, revealing not a ledger, but a single, encrypted data drive glowing faintly blue. Sarah stared, stunned. "He kept 2 plans." "Richard was a liar, Sarah," I finished, picking up the drive. It felt warm in my palm. "But he loved me enough to leave me the final escape hatch. You can have the vault contents. You clearly have the resources to deal with Victor and the service. But this drive? This stays with me. It proves I'm a victim, not the architect of his crimes." I looked at the gaping hole in the wall where my children had just been led to safety by Sarah's silent operatives. "Take the drive, Eleanor," Sarah conceded, her voice laced with weary respect. "If you try to use it against us, we'll know. But right now, you need us more than we need your secrets." She nodded curtly to her team, who were already wrapping up the neutralized Vulture One and his men. Then she looked back at me, a profound finality in her gaze. "This wasn't about the money, Eleanor. It was about loyalty. You chose your children over Richard's legacy, a mistake he could never forgive." With that, she turned and walked into the smoking breach, disappearing into the woods with her forces and the mystery of the vault. I stood alone in the ruined study, the red alarm light on the drop proximity sensor still blinking frantically. The service agents were mobilizing outside, alerted by the gunfire, ready to descend upon a scene of an apparent paramilitary ambush. I clutched the glowing drive, the only proof that I hadn't been part of the original conspiracy, the only thing that might buy my freedom. I walked to the telephone, took a deep breath, and dialed the number for my chief attorney, my voice steady, utterly calm, ready to spin a tale of kidnapping, corporate espionage, and a sudden, terrifying realization of my husband's hidden life. The drama was over. The war, however, had just found its new general, and I would not be playing the victim for long.